Milo felt the world tilt the moment he heard Vesper whisper his name, even though no one had ever taught the idle cat to speak like that. The colony moved around them in lazy confidence, unaware that Vesper stood frozen at the edge of the glowing roots, with his eyes flickering in a strange pattern, as if someone invisible were answering him. Milo crept closer, heart pounding, watching Vesper's shadow stretch in a direction the light didn't come from. Every instinct told him to run, yet something deeper pushed him forward. The whisper came again, softer, trembling, almost afraid. Why would the most adored cat in the colony sound like that? Milo blinked up at the empty doorway Vesper was staring at, and for a moment he saw a second pair of eyes shimmering in the dark. When Vesper suddenly turned his head toward him, smiling a little too slow, Milo's breath caught as the forest lights flickered out one by one, leaving only Vesper's glowing stare fixed directly on him. Milo kept his distance as Vesper's glowing stare lingered on him longer than any normal cat would hold eye contact. And the way the forest lights trembled felt like a warning meant only for him. He tried to speak, but the air around Vesper shimmered like heat over stone, bending the space so gently that Milo wondered if touching it would burn. The colony's laughter drifted faintly from beyond the trees, a reminder that no one would ever believe him if he tried to explain what he had seen. Vesper finally blinked, and the forest seemed to exhale, though his smile stayed fixed and hollow in the dim light. Milo backed away, expecting Vesper to follow, but the idle cat simply turned toward the empty doorway again, as if answering a call. The whispering returned, too soft to understand but sharp enough to scrape Milo's nerves. Something inside that doorway was waiting, and it wanted Vesper. Maybe it wanted Milo too. Milo slipped deeper into the glowing forest, hoping distance would steady his heartbeat. Yet every sound felt sharper than before. The branches chimed with soft mechanical hums, as if whispering warnings he lacked the courage to interpret. He tried to focus on the familiar patterns of the roots, but they pulsed irregularly, almost sickly, like the forest itself was unsettled by what Vesper had become. Milo paused beneath a cluster of swaying light spores, trying to make sense of the fear rising in him. Why would the most admired cat behave as though he were controlled by something unseen? The thought chilled him enough to push him into motion again. As he turned, a gust of cold air rushed past, carrying the faint echo of Vesper's whisper. Milo glanced back toward the dark doorway, and even from afar it felt like an eye watching him breathe. Milo pressed on until the forest opened into a quiet clearing where the glowing roots braided together in shapes that reminded him of old stories Elder Marrow once muttered when he thought no one was listening. Milo wished he had paid better attention. A soft tremor rippled beneath his paws, and the braided roots brightened as though responding to his presence. Something in the air felt heavier, almost expectant. Milo realized he hadn't escaped Vesper at all. He had only stepped closer to the truth. Vesper was hiding. The wind shifted again, carrying faint hints of static crackle that clung to Milo's whiskers. He couldn't shake the feeling that Vesper wasn't the only one listening to him. As the clearing dimmed, Milo felt an invisible pull, urging him toward the heart of the forest, where answers waited. Answers others were too afraid to seek. Milo turned sharply at a rustle behind him, fur rising as Elder Marrow emerged from the shadows with his slow, uneven steps. Marrow's voice rasped with a quiet tremble, as he warned Milo that wandering alone after sensing Vesper's call was more dangerous than he understood. Milo begged him to explain, but Marrow's gaze flicked toward the treetops as if something overhead might be listening. The elder's silence carried more fear than any words could hold. Milo pressed closer, determined, but Marrow only murmured that the idle cat the colony adored was not the same creature they once knew. Before Milo could ask what that meant, a distant pulse of blue light shuddered through the forest, making Marrow flinch. The elder whispered for Milo to run, but the roots beneath them began to vibrate as if awakening. Milo raced after Elder Marrow, trying to keep up as the old cat limped deeper into the glowing forest, each step marked by a faint metallic click that echoed through the quiet. Marrow refused to answer any of Milo's questions, his eyes darting nervously toward every shifting shadow. The forest felt different now, more alert, as though the roots themselves were listening. Milo sensed Marrow's fear growing with every breath, and it scared him more than Vesper's whisper ever had. When they reached a cluster of leaning trunks, Marrow finally slowed, his voice trembling as he warned Milo that Vesper carried something inside him that no cat should host. Milo pressed for details, but Marrow shut down instantly, staring at the ground as if speaking the truth would summon something dreadful. Then from far away, the same whisper Milo had heard earlier echoed again, and Marrow staggered back in terror. Marrow led Milo to a fallen tree embedded with long-dead circuitry, where the forest hummed in a broken, uneven rhythm. He whispered, "That long ago the colony attempted an experimental upgrade designed to enhance emotional resonance, but something went terribly wrong, and the results were buried." Milo felt a sharp chill as he realized Vesper must have been the one who received the final version. Marrow refused to say what the upgrade actually did, only that Vesper's eyes should not glow the way they did unless something inside him was calling back. Milo felt the weight of the secret pressing on him like a heavy stone. If the colony knew, why had no one spoken up? Or had the truth been erased by the idol they adored? A low rumble rose from beneath the roots, and Milo braced himself as the ground gently quivered. Milo decided he couldn't wait for half-answers anymore, and turned toward the deeper part of the forest, where he had once seen Vesper disappear at night. Marrow protested weakly, but Milo pushed forward, following the faint traces of blue shimmer that clung to the roots like footprints. The deeper he traveled, the colder the air became, as if the forest itself were warning him to stay away. Milo's paws tingled with every step, and strange whispers drifted through the trees, repeating fragments of words he couldn't understand. The path narrowed until Milo had to duck under drooping branches that sparked with tiny lights. Ahead, he saw a faint glow that did not belong to the forest. Something mechanical, controlled, hidden on purpose. Milo swallowed hard. Whatever Vesper was visiting late at night was closer than heard. When Milo reached the source of the glow, he froze. Nestled between twisted roots was a small metallic door half buried beneath the forest, faintly humming with a pulse that matched Vesper's shifting eye patterns. Milo sensed immediately that no ordinary colony cat was meant to see this. The door's edges vibrated with thin strands of blue light, and the air around it felt strangely heavy. Milo pressed his ear to the surface and heard faint murmuring like distant voices layered over one another. He stepped back, heart racing, realizing this place was older than he expected and connected to secrets no one ever mentioned. As he reached out to touch it, the humming rose sharply, making him flinch. Something behind the door stirred, responding to his presence. Well, Milo gathered his courage and pressed his paw lightly against the metallic door. It responded instantly, sliding open with a quiet hiss as cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of metal, dust, and something strangely familiar. The chamber beyond was dim and cramped, illuminated only by faint blue strands running along the walls. Milo stepped inside, his small body trembling as he realized this place had been active recently. On the far wall, glowing symbols pulsed in patterns identical to the ones he had seen flicker in Vesper's eyes. Milo understood then. This was the source of whatever was inside Vesper. Before he could explore further, a sudden flicker of movement made him spin around. The door was closing, slowly, as though something unseen wanted him sealed inside. The door sealed behind Milo with a heavy finality that made the chamber feel smaller by the second. Cold air brushed across his whiskers as the faint blue symbols along the wall brightened, responding to his presence. Milo swallowed hard and stepped deeper inside, following the hum that pulsed like a distant heartbeat. The metal floor vibrated gently, each tremor synchronized with the glow. Milo wondered how many nights Vesper had stood in this very room, whispering into the darkness. The thought chilled him more than the air. As Milo approached a low pedestal in the center of the chamber, a swirl of lights rose like dust disturbed by a ghostly breath. He heard something, faint-mented, like a memory echoing inside metal walls. It almost sounded like Vesper calling for help. Milo's courage wavered, but he forced himself forward. Whatever truth waited in this chamber had already begun changing everything he thought he knew. Milo approached the pedestal and noticed a thin crack in the surface, as though something had once been forced into it and hastily removed. The hum intensified, weaving into strange tones that seemed to whisper half-formed words. Milo pressed his ear close and heard overlapping voices, some soft, some trembling, all sounding trapped. He pulled back instinctively, his fur bristling. Suddenly, a burst of light shot from the pedestal, scattering luminous particles across the room. They floated upward before converging into a swirling image. Vesper standing alone in the forest, eyes glowing with unnatural intensity. The image flickered, revealing flashes of pain etched in his expression. Milo felt his heart ache. Vesper wasn't only dangerous, he was suffering. Before the image faded, it twisted once more, revealing a dark silhouette looming behind Vesper like a parasite clinging to light. The projection dissolved in a sudden flash, leaving Milo alone again in the cold chamber. His heartbeat thudded painfully against his chest as he tried to understand what he had seen. Vesper wasn't simply whispering to something, something was whispering back. Something that clung to him like a living shadow. Milo backed away from the pedestal, paws trembling. But the floor lit beneath him, forming a trail of soft blue light pointing toward a narrow passage at the chamber's far wall. He hesitated, wondering if following it was brave or foolish. But the memory of Vesper's haunted expression pushed him onward. As Milo stepped into the passage, the walls tightened around him, the faint hum rising to a tense pitch. He knew he was getting close to the truth. Too close to turn back now. The corridor opened into a cramped alcove where the air felt heavier, almost thick with old secrets. Milo's breath fogged as he approached a large cylindrical device embedded in the wall. Strange symbols pulsed across its surface, looping in patterns he recognized from Vesper's eyes. He reached a tentative paw toward the device, and it responded instantly, its surface igniting with cascading waves of blue light. Milo jumped back, but the device continued to pulse, projecting faint, shaky images of Vesper interacting with the shadows that surrounded him. Milo watched Vesper struggle, fighting against something invisible that pulled at him from all sides. The images tightened around the device like desperate memories. Milo felt his chest tighten, realizing Vesper's idolized confidence had been nothing but a mask hiding a deep battle no one else had seen. As Milo watched the final flickering image fade away, a sudden tremor shook the alcove. The trail of blue lights leading back into the corridor flickered, then extinguished entirely. Milo's heart thundered as darkness crept up the walls like rising water. Before he could react, the cylindrical device let out a soft chime, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow upward tunnel. A faint stream of warm air drifted down, carrying traces of forest scents mixed with static. Milo understood instantly this was where Vesper escaped to during the nights. Gathering his courage, he leapt onto the ledge and climbed. As he neared the top, he felt the air shift again, dangerously familiar. When he finally pushed his head through the opening, Milo froze. Vesper was standing above him, waiting. Milo froze in the tunnel opening, breath caught in his chest as Vesper stood motionless above him, framed by a dim halo of trembling forest light. For a moment, neither of them moved. Vesper's eyes glowed with a quiet intensity that felt less like a threat and more like a plea. But the way his pupils flickered in shifting patterns made Milo's fur stand on end. Milo clambered out onto the forest floor, trembling, but Vesper didn't speak, not aloud. Instead, a cold whisper drifted through the air, echoing inside Milo's thoughts with eerie clarity. Milo stumbled back, realizing Vesper wasn't whispering to an unseen force anymore. He was whispering directly to him. The forest hummed around them, listening, waiting. Vesper took one slow step forward, and the roots beneath Milo trembled like they recognized the danger he was in. Vesper approached slowly, each step deliberate, as though fighting against something pulling him in another direction. Milo could see the strain in his expression, the silent battle behind his glowing eyes. He took a step back, but Vesper raised a paw, not to strike, but to warn him. The whispering intensified, crawling across Milo's thoughts like icy vines, and he realized Vesper wasn't the source this time. Something else was speaking through him. Vesper's mouth never moved, yet the voice echoed more clearly with each pulse of light in his eyes. Milo felt a shiver run down his spine as the whisper formed a message telling him to leave, to forget everything he'd seen. But Vesper's trembling posture betrayed fear, not threat. He wasn't warning Milo to save himself. He was warning Milo because he didn't want the thing inside him to notice him. Suddenly, Vesper's legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the glowing roots, gasping as the light around him spiraled into frantic pulses. Milo hesitated, torn between fear and compassion, then rushed to his side. Vesper's body trembled violently, and Milo could feel the cold radiating through his fur. The whispering surged into a chaotic chorus that made Milo's head spin, but beneath the noise he sensed Vesper's own voice struggling to break through. Milo pressed close, calling his name softly, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. For a brief moment, Vesper's glowing eyes dimmed, revealing raw exhaustion beneath the surface. Milo heard a faint, broken plea slip through the air, not from the parasite but from Vesper himself. Before Milo could respond, the roots beneath them shuddered, reacting to Vesper's instability as though the forest feared losing control of him. As Vesper's trembling slowed, Milo felt the heavy air shift, and a faint rustle signaled Elder Marrow's arrival. The old cat emerged from the shadows, eyes wide with a horror Milo had never seen in him before. Marrow limped closer, voice cracking as he hissed at Milo for getting too close. Milo tried to explain what he had discovered underground, but Marrow cut him off, warning that Vesper's condition was the result of a forbidden upgrade meant to bind emotional energy to physical power. It was never stable. Milo stared at Vesper, heart aching as he imagined the pain hidden behind his idle facade. Before Marrow could finish, a pulse of blue light erupted from Vesper, forcing Milo and Marrow to stumble back. The forest groaned around them, as though something deep beneath the earth had awakened. Milo crouched close as the burst faded and Vesper's body fell still, though his eyes continued to glow faintly with a fractured pattern. Elder Marrow whispered that the upgrade had given Vesper immense influence, allowing the colony to adore him while never seeing the cracks beneath. Milo felt anger twist inside him. The colony wasn't just blind. They had been manipulated, fed by the perfect image Vesper was forced to maintain. Milo stepped forward, refusing to let fear silence him. He called Vesper's name again, louder this time, demanding to know the truth. Vesper's breathing hitched, and suddenly his eyes snapped open, the glow inside them swirling like a trapped storm. A jolt of cold air burst outward, and a distorted voice hissed through the trees. Whatever was inside Vesper had awakened, and it knew Milo was close to exposing it. The forest trembling deepened as Vesper's glowing eyes sharpened, locking onto Milo with an intensity that felt almost desperate. Milo took a hesitant step backward, but the roots beneath him shifted, parting to reveal a narrow opening between the trees. A rush of cold air spiraled upward, and Milo recognized the same mechanical scent he had smelled inside the underground chamber. Marrow whispered a warning, urging Milo not to follow whatever force was trying to guide him, but the pull was unmistakable. Vesper's breath hitched as though he wanted to speak, but couldn't. The strange whispering swelled again, turning the forest into a chamber of echoing voices, each urging Milo to turn away. But the tiny opening between the roots beckoned with an eerie familiarity. Milo knew the truth was down there, hidden in the place Vesper had tried so hard to protect. Milo squeezed through the narrow root opening, sliding down the twisting passage as glowing strands brushed against his fur. The air hummed with familiar vibrations, guiding him deeper into the underground chamber net. As he reached the bottom, the roots opened into a dim hall lined with metal panels that buzzed with distant power. Milo recognized the place from his earlier exploration, but now something felt different, like the entire chamber was awake and aware of him. Shadows drifted across the floor with subtle movement, reacting to Milo's breaths. He steadied himself and pressed on until he reached a massive circular door at the far end. The door throbbed with rhythmic blue light, pulsing like the heartbeat of the forest. Milo stepped closer, sensing this was where Vesper's secret lived, buried and waiting to be uncovered. The massive door vibrated as Milo drew closer, and without him touching it, thin lines of light crawled across its surface like waking nerves. A low chime rang out, resonating through Milo's bones. The door slowly rotated open, releasing a rush of cold, metallic air that made Milo shiver. He stepped inside and stopped, stunned. The chamber was filled with glowing strands suspended like roots, all connected to a central crystalline core that pulsed in time with the forest above. But the sight that shook Milo most was the collection of holographic memory fragments floating around the core, each showing Vesper at different moments, hesitating, suffering, crying out in silence. Milo realized Vesper hadn't chosen his idol status. He had been engineered into it, trapped by the very upgrade meant to empower him. The truth felt heavier than he expected, sinking like a stone in his chest. As Milo moved deeper into the chamber, the holographic memories intensified, forming a full sequence. He watched Vesper's transformation, how the upgrade was installed, how the colony admired him more and more, and how each praise fed the parasite in his core. Milo felt sick, realizing the colony's admiration wasn't a gift, it was fuel. The core flickered sharply, and the memories scattered like startled birds. A heavy rumble surged through the chamber, followed by a harsh, distorted voice telling Milo he had gone too far. The glowing strands curled inward like clenched claws, reacting to his presence. Milo braced himself as the crystalline core blazed bright enough to sting his eyes. He knew he had triggered something dangerous, something the forest and Vesper had both been trying to contain. The chamber's trembling rose into a violent shake as the crystalline core pulsed like a pounding alarm. Milo stumbled back, but the glowing strands whipped around him, herding him toward the exit. As he fled through the rotating door, a blast of cold air struck his back, carrying a sound that froze his blood, a tortured cry that belonged to Vesper. Milo sprinted through the passage, his paws skidding against shifting roots as the entire underground network trembled. When he burst back into the forest, he found Vesper standing shakily, his breath ragged and eyes dimming under the weight of the parasite's rage. Elder Marrow stared in horror as cracks of blue light crawled across Vesper's fur. Milo understood instantly the truth he had uncovered had weakened the parasite's hold and angered it. Now the forest itself seemed ready for a confrontation that no one could avoid. The forest throbbed like a living heartbeat as Milo stood frozen between Vesper and the trembling roots. Vesper's breaths came in ragged pulls, each exhale releasing faint streaks of light that drifted like broken data. Elder Marrow stepped forward, whispering for Milo to stay behind him, but Milo refused, inching toward Vesper despite the danger buzzing in the air. The parasite inside Vesper radiated through his body in violent pulses, reshaping the glow in his eyes into swirling storm patterns. The forest's lights flickered as though reacting to his instability. Suddenly, Vesper's gaze met Milo's, raw fear cutting through the chaos, and Milo realized Vesper was fighting, desperately, to keep the parasite from lashing out. Milo called his name, voice trembling, and the forest fell silent for a heartbeat. But then a blast of cold air surged outward, and the parasite hissed through Vesper's trembling form, furious that Milo had seen the truth. The blast sent Milo sliding backward through the dirt, but he scrambled up quickly, refusing to abandon Vesper. Marrow shouted for him to run, warning that the parasite was losing control, but Milo shook his head and pushed forward again. Vesper staggered, struggling to steady himself as waves of cold light rippled through his body. Milo noticed something new. Each pulse of energy dimmed Vesper's natural glow and made the parasite's presence stronger. It wasn't feeding on the forest anymore. It was feeding on Vesper. Milo's heart clenched at the realization, and he shouted Vesper's name with all the courage he had left. For a moment, Vesper's trembling eased, and his eyes softened, but the moment shattered quickly as the parasite snarled through him, twisting his voice into a corrupted echo that demanded Milo stay away. Milo forced himself closer until he stood only a few paw lengths away from Vesper. The cold radiating from him felt like stepping into a storm, but Milo held his ground. He spoke softly, reminding Vesper of the moments he had glimpsed in the chamber, the pain, the struggle, the silent pleas buried beneath the idol's mask. Vesper's breathing slowed, the chaotic glow in his eyes flickering with uncertainty. The parasite's voice crackled through the air, demanding control, but Vesper fought back, straining to lift his head toward Milo. For a fleeting second, Vesper's true voice broke through in a trembling whisper, begging Milo not to leave him alone in the darkness. The forest roots responded, brightening in faint pulses of solidarity. But then the parasite struck violently, tearing Vesper backward and sending him crashing into the glowing roots. Vesper's body slammed into the roots with enough force to dim the entire clearing, and the parasite howled through him. A shrill, mechanical screech that made Milo's ears flatten. The forest recoiled, its lights flickering wildly. Milo rushed to Vesper, but a sudden burst of energy erupted outward, knocking him back again. Marrow limped forward, desperation written across every scar, and revealed the final truth: the forbidden upgrade was designed to draw emotional devotion and convert it into power. But it had malfunctioned. Instead of empowering Vesper, it had trapped him in a cycle of consuming and being consumed. The parasite grew stronger each time the colony adored him. Milo felt his stomach drop. The colony's praise had chained Vesper to his suffering. As Marrow spoke, Vesper's eyes briefly cleared, and Milo saw the apology buried within them. Before Milo could react, the ground split open along the roots, releasing a surge of blinding light that shot up around Vesper like a cage. The parasite's distorted voice screamed through the clearing, furious that Milo had seen its weakness. Vesper writhed inside the swirling column, his body shaking with the effort to resist as the parasite tried to break free through him. Milo sprinted toward the light, ignoring Marrow's cries to stop. He knew Vesper couldn't hold out much longer. The forest roared with static, branches thrashing as though urging Milo forward. He reached the edge of the glowing column, calling Vesper's name with every ounce of strength he had. For the first time, Vesper's eyes stopped flickering. They focused directly on Milo, steady, clear, and pleading. Then the light exploded. The explosion of light hurled Milo backward, yet he pushed himself up instantly, blinking through the swirling haze that filled the clearing. The forest lights flickered like panicked fireflies as the energy column collapsed inward, leaving Vesper suspended in midair for a heartbeat before dropping him heavily onto the trembling roots. Milo scrambled toward him, ignoring the ache in his limbs. Vesper's eyes glowed faintly, no longer swirling, just dim and exhausted. The parasite's shriek echoed through the forest, fading into the ground like smoke sinking through cracks. Milo reached Vesper's side, breath trembling as he whispered his name. Vesper barely stirred, whispering a broken apology that made Milo's chest tighten with aching relief. The forest exhaled with a long, low hum, sensing that something powerful had shifted. But as the ground settled, Milo felt the truth rising. The parasite wasn't gone. It was weakened, wounded, and waiting for its moment to reclaim control. Milo pressed his forehead against Vesper's, trying to anchor him to the moment, but Vesper flinched as the parasite's faint whisper rippled through the air like the echo of a nightmare trying to crawl back into reality. Marrow stepped forward, warning that the parasite would recover unless exposed publicly. Its strength depended on secrecy, on shadows, on the colony's blind devotion. Milo's heart thudded with newfound determination. He couldn't let Vesper face this alone, not after seeing the truth buried under years of forced perfection. Milo urged Vesper to stand, and though every movement seemed to drain him, Vesper slowly rose, leaning heavily against Milo. Marrow nodded grimly, understanding Milo's plan even before he spoke. They needed to bring Vesper into the open. They needed the entire colony to see what had been living inside their idol. Together, Milo and Marrow guided Vesper through the forest toward the heart of the colony. As they approached, the faint sound of chatter drifted through the trees. The colony cats were gathering for their nightly admiration ritual, waiting for Vesper to emerge in flawless serenity. Milo felt anger churn inside him. How easily they adored the image without ever looking beyond. When the trio stepped into the clearing, dozens of cat heads turned. Their admiration shifted instantly to confusion as they saw Vesper stumbling, his once perfect posture broken and trembling. Gasps rippled across the gathering. The parasite reacted violently, its presence crackling around Vesper's body like invisible chains tightening. Milo stepped forward, shouting for the colony to look closely, to see what Vesper had been forced to carry. Silence rippled outward, as the forest seemed to hold its breath. The parasite surged in panic as the colony stared, its whispers rising into frantic, distorted screams that only Milo and Vesper seemed to hear. Vesper staggered, clutching at the ground as streaks of blue light cracked across his body. The colony murmured fearfully, unsure whether to help or flee. Milo stepped in front of Vesper, planting himself between the idol and the crowd. His voice rang out, telling them what he had seen in the underground chamber, the memories, the suffering, the truth buried beneath Vesper's forced perfection. The colony recoiled in disbelief, but Milo pressed on, his voice steady despite the roaring in his ears. Vesper lifted his head, eyes overflowing with guilt and exhaustion, and the sight alone cracked the colony's certainty. Their idol wasn't flawless at all. He was breaking. Entering washed. Norik. Anishi. Amwal. A sudden scream erupted through Vesper as the parasite made its final attempt to seize control, sending a wave of freezing energy bursting outward. The colony cried out in terror, but Milo didn't move. He rushed straight into the storm of light, pressing himself against Vesper's trembling chest. Milo shouted that Vesper wasn't alone anymore, that the parasite couldn't hide in silence or shadows, now that everyone could see it. The clearing blazed with light as Vesper clung to Milo's words like a lifeline. The parasite's shriek cracked through the air one last time before the light fractured outward, dissolving into drifting shards that evaporated into the night. When the glow faded, Vesper collapsed into Milo's paws, exhausted but free. The colony stood speechless, their illusion shattered, and for the first time they saw the brave Kitten who had exposed the truth none of them dared to face.